I'm really excited to be here. Well, if I'm being honest with you, I'm actually quite nervous and anxious to be here. And I'm glad I'm telling you how I actually feel, because today we're going to have an honest conversation. And see, I'm anxious because I don't believe I belong on this stage. See, because I don't fully believe in myself. As I have no formal titles or degrees attached to my name, I realize I don't fully believe in Ryan Anthony Williams. No title. But I am here. And I'm here because though I have this self-doubt, I recently discovered that I also have a lot of value to share. And I'm here because I look at my family, my friends, many of you in this audience, and though we may doubt ourselves, I want us to understand we have this tremendous capacity to create and share world-changing value. But if we want to understand, access, and create this value, we need to understand where the coexisting doubt in our capabilities comes from. For me, a lot of that starts with my college experience. For anyone who knows me in here, it's been quite a long experience, especially since it started in 2013 and I still have not graduated. Coming into college, I was dealing with a lot. I lost my little brother. I was struggling financially, struggling with my identity. And so it came as no surprise going into my sophomore year when I was diagnosed with depression. And I found myself trapped in these cycles, these moments of feeling extremely passionate and purposeful to feeling extremely unmotivated and sometimes undeserving to live. And this led me to drop out of school. But I still wanted to fulfill a purpose and I wanted to escape my stress, so I went and became a United States Marine. Definitely not as stress-free as I would have thought, but it did give me purpose, and that was to fulfill a mission of graduating from Syracuse University. And so I returned, I took classes, I became a certified personal trainer on campus, and I saw some success. My grades improved, I was well known on campus as a personal trainer. I even fulfilled a freshman year dream of becoming a brother of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. December 2017, we created and led an event called Suffering in Silence for my fraternity in partnership with the Counseling Center to discuss the prevalence of mental health stressors, stigmas, and solutions. And the event was successful. I recall afterwards feeling extremely proud, as if conducting a conversation about mental health meant that I was overcoming my own struggles with it. But I soon learned how wrong I was. See, that same evening I returned home to discover I'd been burglarized. As I now literally had no items of identity, no cash, much of my possessions gone, I realized that the depression I thought was gone was really just waiting for the next explosive trigger to set it loose. But I share this story with you all today not to seek pity or provide excuse, but to demonstrate how connected we all are. I told you I feel like I don't belong on this stage because of my life experiences, but if I asked anyone in this audience to come on stage and tell us what makes you valuable, you could reference some traumatic experience that makes you feel undeserving. But see, this is wrong, because our experiences of stress do not define who we are nor what we're capable of doing. If we could, for a second, step out the lens of our own lives and look through the eyes of someone else in this audience, we would see how similar our stressful experiences are. And because of this universal experience of stress, this is not where our uniqueness comes from. No, the experience of stress does not define who we are, but the way in which we perceive ourselves and our capabilities in relation to the stress we experience defines who we are and what we're capable of achieving. One of the most accepted definitions of stress comes from psychologist Richard Lazarus, in which he describes stress as a feeling in which a person perceives the demands placed on them exceeds the personal and social resources they can mobilize. In my own words, stress is what we feel about ourselves and what we can do when we think we have no control over a situation. And so it begins as a very untrue negative thought in the mind manifests into a destructive reality through behaviors that confirms this negativity. But see, March 2018, I was able to break this cycle. A client I was training asked me to become her business partner. And I'm not going to sell you on the idea of the business, because it is not the existence of the business that gives me my understanding of self-value. but it's the act of being a business partner, the act of creating and sharing value, the act of being an entrepreneur that provided me a perceptual shift in how I see myself and what I'm capable of doing. You see, traditionally, when we think about entrepreneurs, we think about people who make really cool things and who build businesses, but this is incomplete. Entrepreneurs are people who focus on creating and sharing value for others. So it begins on the abstract plane of the mind as an unshapen and intangible idea manifests into a very real solution through behaviors that confirm this. And so I offer you a definition of a functioning entrepreneur as anyone whose life's purpose aligns with creating and sharing value for others. And I say functioning entrepreneur because truthfully, most entrepreneurs are not functioning today, at least not fully. Look at the failure rates of new businesses. We see that over 50% of businesses fail within the first 5 years of formation. And I find this intriguing because these numbers remain remarkably consistent, regardless of trends or fluctuations in the economy. So this leads me to believe that there's no single market factor that leads to business failure. See, a business entity is just a scaled up version of the entrepreneur. It's just a vehicle used to communicate and deliver the value of the individual entrepreneur. So when a business fails, it's because the individual entrepreneur was unable to scale, sustain, and adapt their own perception of their value in relation to the stressors they experience in entrepreneurship. This inspired me to work with business leaders and entrepreneurs to understand how do we scale, sustain, and adapt our own value to deal with the stressors in our lives. And from this, I want to share 5 principles I use to guide me, and hopefully they will offer some value for you. So the first principle is awareness, or the acknowledgement of the situation. See, when an entrepreneur comes up with an idea, it's only valuable if the person they create it for believes it adds value to their life. In entrepreneurship, we call this understanding the consumer. If we don't understand who we're creating this valuable product for, then we run into this risk of an inability to communicate with our consumers. But if we seek to better understand others, then we must first better understand ourselves. A recent study conducted by psychologist Michael Freeman demonstrated that over 70% of entrepreneurs suffer from at least one mental health disorder. And I find this interesting because the existence of the disorder often came before the existence of the business. And I also find this intriguing because the existence of the disorder actually gave the entrepreneurs a competitive edge. Take, for example, somebody with ADHD, in which they're most likely to be impulsive, which leads them to take more risk, which increases their rate of failure. But over time, these losses become lessons, and they learn to make less mistakes. In my own life, I realized my most creative moments often came on the bout of a depressive episode. And so the existence of mental health conditions is not what leads to an entrepreneur's failure. Oftentimes, it enables them. But it's the inability of the entrepreneur to acknowledge and manage the existence of the stresses in their life that leads to their failure. In my own life, I seek to practice self-awareness through a process of daily meditation. For at least 20 minutes a day, I breathe in for 4 seconds, hold my breath for 4 seconds, release my breath for 4 seconds, and rest. And through this process, I'm able to increase the awareness of my own internal world of thoughts and feelings in a way that allows me to acknowledge them without placing judgment. And now, I understand the factors, not problems, that exist within myself. And I know myself. And I can begin to accept myself, which is what we learned through the second principle of empathy. Oftentimes, when we seek to know ourselves, we find out there are things that we really do not like. And in that process, we look at our life experiences and begin to think the most negative thoughts about ourselves. But recently, I discovered a way to break this cycle, at least for myself, and I hope it does the same for you. And I do this through asking myself 5 questions whenever I think a negative thought. Question 1, is the negative thought true? Question 2, can you know with absolute certainty that this thought is true? Question 3, how do you feel when you choose to believe this thought? Question 4, how do you treat others around you when you choose to believe this negative thought? And question 5, who could you be if you were unable to think this thought? And I propose these questions to you to demonstrate that oftentimes we will realize that these negative thoughts are untrue, but they have a very real destructive capacity if we choose to believe them in our lives. And so we know ourselves, we accept ourselves, and now we can begin to create and manifest this value through the third and fourth principle of ideation and creation. See, over the last year, I took a leave of absence from social media. My friends, family already was out of school. And I realized in that process that the time to develop ideas is in a passive state, a state in which we're not actively interacting with the environment. In this way, we're able to intake information, digest it in relation to our own self-awareness and experiences, and manifest an authentic idea. From here, we're able to manifest this idea as value through creation, in which we bring this idea into structured existence. And what I mean here is up until this point, we've looked at all the internal factors that impact our capacity to create and share value. But once we start sharing that value with others, we have to monitor and assess constantly the internal and external factors that impact our ability to create and share value, such as fear of other people's opinions or fear of failure. So we know ourselves, we accept ourselves, and now we have this valuable idea. And with the last principle, we learned the necessity of stress through adaptation. See, most of us in this room, we want to achieve more. We want to create value, but we're not ready to accept the fact that in order to do so, we need to change. Adaptation teaches us the necessity for stress in our lives. As I share these principles with you, I want to share one more insight. And that is, if we are fortunate enough to continue living on after we experience stress, then that experience will now continue to live on through us. What ultimately determines if an experience is good or bad is our ability to shift our perception. Are we going to use these experiences to confirm these cycles of negativity that exist in the untrue plane of our mind? Or use them to affirm the fact that within us, we all have the capacity to create and share world-changing value as entrepreneurs? Thank you.